Podcast. I'm your host, of course, Shawn Soole. This is probably going to be my last live stream for a little while. Like, I've got so many episodes in the bank, and I've got so many people hitting me up to do episodes and be on the show. I could literally be posting something every 2 days and still have time. I just don't have the personal bandwidth to be recording a show every 2 days. Today we've got Geoffrey Toffetti from Frontline Performance Group on the show. I'm really interested about this one because it's sort of definitely like a macro trainer when it comes to the hotel sector and the hospitality sector. So I've been reading a lot about his stuff and the things that he does, and aligns a lot with my mentalities. And even in the green room, I'm like dropping what I like to say, and he's like, "Yep, that's exactly what I say as well." So I'm really looking forward to this because 2026 for me personally is going to be a big year of trying to nail the hospitality industry, especially the food and beverage department or food and beverage sector, into understanding that training is good for staff, and making sure your team stays and nurture them is way more important than just turning and burning and replacing them. So, Geoffrey, good morning. Well, good morning for me. Good afternoon for you because you're on the East Coast. How are you today?
I am great. Great to be with you, Shawn.
So, usually I'm a big comic book fan. If you don't know, so I got comic book first editions right behind me. What's your origin story in the hospitality sector?
Yeah, my first real job that I took seriously in my life was a valet at a beach resort in Florida called the Trade Winds. And I kind of cut my early teeth there, rose to management, became a director. So spent about 4 years immersed in the hospitality industry. So my roots really were hospitality. It's where I think I learned the fundamentals of service and how to interact with people and how to be influential, was all during that hospitality period. And then I left the industry for 12 years, went to a startup, was there for a long time. And then when I landed at FPG 14 years ago, they weren't working in hospitality. And given that the company's whole purpose was to support frontline team members in generating revenue and improving customer experience, that was all they ever did. I said, well, this is a perfect fit for hotels. So we started the mission, and now we work with about 2,500 hotels worldwide and growing.
Nice. So when you sort of do your initial walk-in, do you have a lot of hotels come to you with, or usually when I consult, the hardest thing is that people come to you going, I know I have a bit of a problem. I need you to come in and look at it. And then you usually go into it and you're like, oh no, you've got a really big problem. When you walk into these hotel clients and these businesses, what's like one of the big first cultural red flags when you're walking around that you see that sort of a lot of operators are blind because of the forest for the trees?
That is a tremendous question. By far the number one thing is something you were alluding to, is that they take the front line for granted. They almost think about it as a necessary evil, that it's something they have to have, but it annoys them. Now there are tons of hotels out there and restaurant owners that don't think that way, but that's a very common thing in the world, is that the hourly employees at the front line, they burn and churn, just like you said. They're going to quit anyway. Why invest in them? And what we know that they may not know yet is how much revenue is dependent upon the performance of those people, and that often those people are the only people your customers will interact with. So therefore, they are your brand. A lot of companies don't realize the front desk agent or the bartender is the brand. It's not the decor, it's not the sign outside, it's the interaction with that person, because that's the whole experience in hospitality. So I would say that's the biggest thing, is when we go in and we see a dismissive attitude toward the front line, we know we have an uphill battle.
Do you find when it comes to training, I always find there's usually a massive dichotomy, a massive gap between what you feel is necessary for the business as a consultant going in and what the business thinks, and then they don't really understand the gap in between. Because usually training does come down to being like, it's a tick at the box. Oh, we did a day session with our frontline staff. They now know how to. I love your thing, not upselling, upgrade. I really do love that, because if you apply that to a lot of things, how do you reframe training when it comes to big corporate clients to actually stick with the frontline staff and to stick with the staff that they have on board?
Yeah, so our model might be helpful. Just a little background. We spent 25 years doing consulting and training on-prem, and then because of COVID, we had to kind of shift gears, and we had some technology that we had already built. So we spent the COVID down days basically changing over the technology so it could be client facing and giving it to them. So what we've done is we've taken all that and digitized it, and it's now digital training primarily. But the point you're making is still, still very relevant. It's one thing to train, it's another to measure. So we spend a lot of time, like the reason our technology, I think, is so valuable to our customers is it makes it very easy to measure outcomes and to measure performance. So you can do the training, like traditionally we would go to a hotel, we would do training, we would leave. Anecdotally, it feels like it's better, but you don't really know. Well, now we know definitively if it's working. And we know where it's not working and which hotel managers or which restaurant managers aren't engaging. And so we have that whole framework at our fingertips. But it is hard to get training to stick on its own without the culture, of the leadership being such that they're going to follow up with it. They're going to reinforce it. They're going to remind them, those are the kind of things it takes to change performance. And that's why our technology sort of helps the managers do that.
I'm going to get into Engage because I started looking over that tech, and it was really fascinating because accountability is such a massive thing when it does come to training. When it comes to hotel, the ecosystem, I obviously come from a hotel background myself, and it's always been a challenge to have GMs and upper management understand that food and beverage can be a sector of the hotel that can actually make money. It's not just there as an amenity. And it's been the biggest struggle of my career, I think, to try and reframe that. How do you reframe that? Because, of course, as you were saying, like operators are at forest for the trees. They don't see their frontline staff as being the people that are representing their brands. They don't see housekeeping. If a housekeeper says hello in the hallways, much nicer than walking past a housekeeper who completely ignores you as a guest. How do you sort of reframe each department for a general manager or an operator to understand that every single department is as equally important as the next one?
Yeah, we start that, I think, in the framing of what is service. A lot of times people think service is the person talking to the guest, and our position is service is the entire experience. It's if you come from hospitality, that the old edict that you never walk by a cigarette butt in the parking lot, right? It's like every aspect of what the guest experiences is part of the service. And that means the friendliness of the housekeepers, the knowledge of the property. We teach engineers and housekeepers, you have to know your property so that if someone asks you a question, you don't have to go and get help. You can just answer the question. You should know what's going on the property during the day. So if someone says, where's the meeting for what, you don't have to go and make them wait. And it's basically a holistic view of the guest experience. And so that's how we frame it. And then when we get into specific touch points like the front desk or a food and beverage outlet, then we're getting much more into what's happening in that face-to-face interaction that's going to maximize the experience and maximize the revenue. When I left the trade winds for a short time and went back, and in between I worked at a branded luxury hotel. And in the training, I'm not going to say who it was, people out there might know, but in the training, they said the purpose of luxury is to have your guests leave fat, happy, and broke. And that formula, is easily trainable. When people understand, okay, we want them to spend a lot of money, but we want that money to give them something they really love and have a great experience with. You don't want to sell something that they don't enjoy. That's cheesy and icky. You want to sell things and then have them enjoy it. And that's how the formula works, where you get maximum revenue, maximum service.
How do you, again, I think I'm going to use reframing way too much in this episode completely, because it is a lot of your mentalities that I've read and watched is about like changing this perception. And of course, I'm trying to change perception about training. Upselling, I love the fact that you use it. Upgrading, it's always sort of been dirty word. And even in the young generation, they're like, oh, I don't feel good about like pushing. I feel like I'm hustling. I'm like, oh no, it's an experience thing. How do you turn upselling or upgrading into this natural guest centric and culture driven sort of point?
Well, that I love this question because it's right to the heart of our core philosophy. We call our, if you will, our system service-based sales. So I agree. If you're asked to sell something and you don't either believe in it or you don't know how to position it, it's going to be awkward, and it's going to be, weird for the guest. It's going to feel pushy. What we teach is you never want to ask something. You want to recommend something. So the only way you can make a recommendation is if you have some idea what interests the guest or what would benefit them. And that's where, in the check-in process, I'll use a front desk as an example. In the check-in process, even the Forbes and AAA standards, they leave us a place for build rapport, connect with your guests. It's in there that you ask an open-ended question. What brings you to town? Is there a special occasion? Are you here for the first time? There's a variety of them. And what happens, a lot of front desk agents will do that, but then they won't retain that little piece of information in order to make a recommendation. So the way you go from being a hustler or cheesy salesperson is to say, okay, you're here on a business trip. What time are you leaving when you leave? And they're like, my flight's at 5 o'clock. Well, then we need to get you a late checkout so you can take a shower, you can change your clothes. It'll make it a lot more comfortable to go to the airport. I didn't ask you a question. I threw it out there as a recommendation. It sounds good. Now you're like, okay, yeah, I could use a shower and I don't have to lug my luggage around and all this. Then the person's going to ask a question like, well, how much is it? And then it's real easy to say, it's only $40 and it's going to make it so much better for your departure day. And that can be, and you can exchange the parts of that recommendation for anything, because you're here on your anniversary, or because you're here to celebrate this thing, or you're attending this group. And that way you're positioning the upgrade to align with something that will benefit them. Like, you would never offer a single business traveler a 2-bedroom suite. That doesn't make any sense. It's going to feel cheesy and icky. You might offer them the executive lounge though, because they can have a cocktail after their meeting, they can relax. There's all that stuff. So it's always make a recommendation, don't ask a question. And it's also always mention a feature and a benefit. Don't just name features, because who cares it has a balcony? Well, it has you can enjoy the sunset. You always want to connect the two. And it goes for food, it goes for beverage, it goes for meeting and events. It's always the same construct. But that's how you prevent it from feeling pushy or icky, is you're serving your guest by educating them about the things you can offer that will enhance their experience, and they have to pay for it.
That's great. When it comes to training and budgets, because it always does come down, especially food and beverage department, or I think every department is like, well, how much is this going to cost me, and what's my ROI? And I always start out saying, like, I like to spend about $1,000 to $1,500 per staff member a year in proper certification courses. They get really good. My argument's always been, I want all my team to be so overeducated that no one else will hire them, because it'll cost anybody else too much. But then the actual dollar figure that goes on to replacing a staff member, like that $3,500 to $5,000, depending on what sort of level of management or tier they're in. How do you sort of pitch that? Because I like to spend usually 1% to 2% top line revenue on training every year. How do you sort of pitch that to a client, and then also bring them back with the ROI, and then also go, and this is actually how much it costs if you need to replace a staff member?
Yes, all very good points. So because of our technology, we are able to quantify the ROI. We average somewhere around 20 to 25 times ROI. So that's not on day one, but that's over the course of a term, whatever term we have with a property. So we're able to measure the ROI, and we actually lead with that. We'll go in and say, we're going to make you $5 million or $500,000 or whatever. And that makes that conversation a lot easier. The other argument on the turnover that I think a lot of managers miss, particularly in touch points where someone is earning money, like in a server position or at a front desk agent position, they're making money on their productivity. The better you train them, the more money they're going to make, the less likely they are to leave. So you get, because the employees you really want to retain are the top performers. It's not every employee that you want to retain. It's the ones actually driving your mission, growing productivity, growing profit. So it's sort of a self-fulfilling positive loop, is that the more you invest in them, the better they'll perform, the more money they'll make, the less likely they are to leave. And they'll start craving more development, which allows you to then enhance their skills more. It's when training is an afterthought, or it's the wrong training, just pairings here. You know this better than I do. A waiter starts an average restaurant somewhere. They're paired with a tenured server. They follow them around for a couple of days, and then they're kind of let go on their own. And let's hope that the person they're following was good at their job, but oftentimes they're not. They're adequate at taking your order and bringing you food, but that's it. So there's no gate that the employees are passing through before they're allowed to interact with your customers that ensures they know how to do that really well and generate money, generate revenue, improve guest experience. If you just throw them out there, it's a crapshoot, and managers are left wondering why is my revenue per guest not as strong as it used to be, or why is this server making so much more than this one? There's no mechanism with which they can take action.
So we've talked about engage a little bit, and it's engage. Sorry with my accent. It's engage, I-N, not E-N. You said this came out of the pandemic and sort of data crunching and data collection. And originally I think originally it was going to be a case study. And then it turned into like, oh, wait a second, we can actually use these data points and actually create something that is constructed for the client and be client facing. Can you walk us through how you do actually show that per staff member, per department, that sort of thing in the app?
Yeah, of course. And it was originally going to be a reporting platform. That's how we conceived it. And we started working on it in like 2016, but it was more just so that we could give our clients reports. And then it started to develop into the whole toolkit. But in the app, we ingest the data from either PMS or POS systems, and we visualize it on the screen, both on a web app and a phone app. And at the employee level, and that's something very unique about it, is there's an interface for the worker. It's not just for the managers. It's not a BI tool. Mm-hmm. And it actually shows them how much money they're making. Like from a server standpoint, it'll show their average revenue per check, their average revenue per guest. It'll show their tip average. It ranks them on a leaderboard so they can see how they rank on those metrics. So you can imagine it's pretty eye-opening to a server that, let's say they pride themselves on doing a great job and they're a good employee and they're making, a 20% average tip. And they're like, man, that's good. And then they realize they're fourth on the leaderboard and there's 3 other people making more than them. But it's not just saying that to them. It's saying, okay, now that you recognize that, here's what you can do about it. Here's the training that we can provide you, the guidance we can provide you. And we actually, so they can see that all on the screen. They can, the managers can set goals so that the person can see how they're tracking against their goals on the screen, how much they're making. And then there's an LMS in there that has all of our content in it. But something else that's new, that's coming into the product right now, is AI insights. So we have trained our own AIs, and we're training more of them. They're called agents. But we've trained these AI agents to actually provide individual servers or front desk agents specific coaching for them on how they can improve their performance and therefore make more money, and provide managers guidance on what they should be doing with their team to generate more revenue or improve the culture. So this is like game-changing technology, because it'd be like if they had you sitting there next to them all day, every day, with your experience, saying, oh, next time try this, or maybe try to say that a little differently, or do this differently. And so it's going to be able to provide that kind of specific personalized feedback that we think is going to be a game changer.
That's very, very cool. And I love AI. I know it's everybody's sort of demonizing it a little bit every now and then, but like I use AI every day. With that being said, like Frontline FPG has been around for 30 years. Been in the hospitality sphere for about 14, 16. How is the training and staff expectations around learning and coaching and the like adaptation of the app sort of changed, especially with the new generation? Obviously, the great thing with the new generation, the Gen Zs that are coming into the market now, they're all very technology illiterate, but they tend to not necessarily take that culture of criticism as well as we probably would back in our day too. So how do you evolve that to start like really going multiple generations? Because I think now we're in a space in the hospitality industry where we have everything from boomers through to Gen Zs all working in different elements, different sections of the hotel, different positions of like management and so on and so forth. How do you adapt that so that you're sort of doing this wide breadth of different generational changes?
Yeah, and we were challenged with this throughout when it was the boomers to the millennials, but you're right, now the Zers are in there and they're a little bit different. So I mean, there are some universal truths when it comes to leadership and getting people to try harder. We call it discretionary effort. How do you get people to give you more than the minimum expectation to keep their job? And it's kind of true across all the generations, but essentially it comes down to the management. So it's really more about how do you train managers to foster a positive, enthusiastic environment. They don't have to be, Jack Welch, but how do you get them to not get in their own way? And there's a few simple things. We boil it down to three things that keep people motivated. One is accountability, one is recognition, and one is reward. So recognition or accountability is like the leaderboards we provide. It's a soft accountability. So you hold yourself accountable. You can see how you're doing. There's goals. You can see how you're doing to your goals. It's not a heavy hand, right? But it's awareness that there is a standard. The recognition is an easy one. I mean, recognize people's effort. You don't have to praise everyone for everything. It's not, that everyone gets a trophy kind of mentality. But if someone's doing something right, make sure you tell them they're doing it right. In our system, we have something called a team feed, so people can share good news or good achievements with the whole team, and then everyone can give a thumbs up like Facebook. So it kind of fosters that recognition piece. And then reward is obviously, incentives or in food and beverage, it's tips. But even in food and beverage in Europe, where the tipping isn't really a thing, what we do is we allow the managers to set some goals and then put an incentive on it. So it might be a contest you run. It might be that you say for everyone who gets above a certain revenue per guest gets an extra $5 per check, or we can configure it any way you want, but give them some kind of reward for going to another level of performance. And when you bring those three things together, whether you're a boomer or a Z-er, I don't know, is that what they say? Zers? I don't know. Zingers. But that system works for all human beings. And it's just a matter of getting managers to just embrace a few truisms. And have you ever heard the term key ring syndrome? Because you and I look about the same age. You might have heard this before.
No.
So it's an old saying when managers used to carry a ring of keys around, that when you got your key ring, all of a sudden you thought you were the king of the environment or the queen, and you started bossing everyone around. It's a common first manager syndrome. I had it myself when I got my first job as a manager. But it's breaking that mentality, invert the pyramid. There's a lot of systems out there, but if managers just recognize that they're supposed to serve the staff, treat the staff the way you want them to treat the guest, and you're going to have a very harmonious environment.
So you've worked in so many different fields. Like I know your focus is definitely the hospitality hotel side of things, but FPG works with car companies and restaurants and hotels and everything. What are the frontline challenges that seem universal and the common thread across every industry that I like to plug and play as much as possible because it makes life a little bit easier. But what's that common thread across every industry that you work with that you can fix?
It's sort of what I was just talking about. I mean, I don't want to beat up on managers, but most of the challenges that we see, particularly in a hospitality or travel environment, is the managers don't treat the staff the way that the staff is expected to treat the customer. And this actually can go down an entire organization. I did a leadership training for a publicly traded hospitality company, and it was to their top 50 executives. So it was a intimidating audience. And I said to them, and there was actually, I think, an audible gasp in the room from one of the people. I said to them, you can expect your guests to be treated the way you treat the people you lead. And I said it because I knew a couple of the people in there were notorious ball breakers. Like they were just hard driving, command and control kind of executives. But it's true. If you treat people that way, they're going to treat their people that way. They're going to treat their people, and it's going to cascade down into the environment. So if anyone listening just remembers this phrase, you can expect your guests to be treated the way you treat your team. If you treat your team with love and care, And accountability, they can't do anything they want, but when they perform well, they have a loving, nurturing environment to come to. Then your guests are going to get that same feeling. And I would say it one other way too. A lot of managers that manage the front line out there, they don't necessarily know. And we know this because we've dealt with over 100,000 frontline people. So we got all kinds of stories. But you may very well be the highlight of their life. They might have stuff going on at home that you can't imagine. We've seen horrific things that we find out about these frontline employees that they're dealing with. And the only safe haven they have is work. And if they go to work and it's a toxic environment or the manager is a jerk, you're putting them in an untenable situation when in exchange, you could be the light of their life. You could be the respite they need. And that is when you really start to unlock people's potential and they'll give you their heart and soul.
How do you deal with I want to say clickbait mentality, the immediate gratification from all generations these days? How do you coach leaders to be patient in the process? Because a lot of times when the red flag gets waved and you get called in, it's usually 3 months, probably too late, sometimes longer. And you're like, well, you're really in a spot where it's bad and they want everything fixed yesterday. How do you coach owners and executives to have patience with this process when it comes to shifting culture and elevating staff up to, as you were saying, like this ecosystem of everybody working together and enjoying themselves and having a good environment and workplace?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a magic bullet for that one, except that you got to set some very small objectives, some small milestones, so that progress can be measured in a situation where the progress might not be obvious. So come up with a contest, come up with a reward system. Like a lot of times we'll go into a hotel environment where it's really not a great situation, and we'll say, okay, Mr. or Mrs. GM, this is what we're going to do. There's going to be a breakfast or a coffee with the GM club, and we're going to set a performance expectation that's very achievable. And those that achieve it are going to come together and have coffee with the GM. Something like that just begins to signal to the frontline management that the GM cares about it and it's important. And in a restaurant, it could be the chef, it could be the owner. They're going to come in and they're going to have 15 minutes alone with them, and they're going to hear them, their story. And what we find is if you know about the reward system in the brain, for most people, the real reward isn't the coffee with the GM, it's the anticipation of the coffee with the GM. And they'll go home and tell their friends or their significant others that are being recognized. That's a very small example of a thing that the main leader can grab hold of that culture a little bit and start to infuse what they want into it, and signal to the other managers that this is how we're going to do things now. And instead of it being punitive, make it, a reward system. But you have to be straight with them and say that, this could be a 3 to 6 month curve here. We're going to try and make change immediately, and you might see some immediate impact. But it's going to take consistency, and they're going to have to commit to. Their managers are the ones that are going to have to really get on board. They're going to have to understand that we're going to change the way we do things. We're going to make it. It's going to be firm. There's going to be accountability, but it's also going to be fun, and there's going to be love, and we're not going to have any of this toxicity or these. I have an ethos in my company, and one of the things that it says is I will not hold someone to standards I don't hold for myself. It's a very common thing that annoys employees, is the good for you but not for me kind of thing. So there's stuff like that you can start early in the conversation, get the head person on board, and then have them embody it first. It'll give you the credibility you need.
So that brings me to a really good point, like, because I find, and this isn't any organization, this is just not hotels, hospitality, that you'll go in and you'll start the process that we've talked about, and then you sort of flag, hey, GM Bob, Tom, the front of house manager, or one of the executive housekeepers, or the head chef. I'm not even going to start picking on back of house head chef toxicity right now, but he's a bit of a dick. He's pissing off a lot of people. We should boot him. And then the management come back and go, yeah, but he's been here so long. He knows all the systems. He knows all the recipes. He does a good job. Yeah, he pisses off people, but they just need to get over it. How do you sort of frame that and then call it out and say, because I've done a couple of seminars as well about back of house and front of house toxicity and that sort of thing. And I'm like, if someone's pissing off, it doesn't matter if they're the top seller, the top bartender, the top chef, get rid of them, because you can't look after one person and piss off the other 25 you have in your team. How do you frame that for GMs? Because I'm sure you've crossed it many, many times where they're like, but he's been here.
A sacred cow.
Yeah, exactly. How do you frame that and push through that change?
Yeah, so I fall back to what I was saying is I say to the GM, okay, I understand your position, but you can expect your guests to have that experience because you're allowing that culture to be that guy or that lady's attitude. So there is no way that a server can be expected to filter out their boss chewing on their neck, turn around and be super loving to the guests. That is not a realistic expectation. So if you're making the decision to retain them, then you can't complain about your service scores or your reviews or all that other stuff because you're allowing it to happen. You're enabling it. That's how the conversation would go.
Yeah, I have, like, just through this talk, I have even myself changed that sort of perception where the guest is always important, but I don't think it's ever been part of that ecosystem of like behavioral knowledge, and then how that gets put over to the staff and how that all affects the whole system that we're a part of from the service point of view.
Yeah, that's right. And I don't know if you're a fan of Simon Sinek. I think his book Start With Why and Leaders Eat Last, those were my favorites. But the idea that if I were going into a super toxic, like I'll give you an example. We did some work in a hospital system, in clinics, and the challenge they were having was collecting the deductibles because it was a lower income hospital system. And as soon as you walked in there, you were like, this is an oppressive, depressing hellhole. I mean, these people are living in a dystopian hell, these people working there, not because of the customers, because of the management team. It was so awful that it was like we had to change their entire worldview in order to make any progress. So what we did is we reframed what they're doing as saving lives. And we got them to pull statistics of how many people walked into one of these clinics and was rushed to an emergency intervention that saved their lives. And it turned out to be like hundreds of people. So we started framing it as this clinic is saving lives. And it just the managers started thinking a little differently. And we figured out how to phrase that in their team meetings and come up with stats that made it a positive, not a negative. And that's an extreme example, but in a food service in the front of the house, come up with something that's more about, we're making people's day. We're creating a dining fantasy, or, we're going to ignite people's imaginations or whatever. Come up with something that transcends the busyness and the transactional nature of it all. But it's going to come down to the managers. I mean, I'm sorry to say, if you have a toxic manager, you have a toxic culture. There's no way around it. And they're going to have to go, or something is going to have to be put in between them and the front of the house team that prevents that from bleeding over. But in our experience, if everyone in the environment wants to shift more toward a positive environment, that negative person is going to either opt themselves out or make the change.
So looking forward in the way of training, we've talked about the generational changes in training and how the next generation's adapting to the industry, which my line when it comes to especially hospitality is we shouldn't be expecting this next generation to work as hard as we did when we were in the game, because that is counterintuitive. Like, shouldn't we be leaving the industry better than when we started in it? It just doesn't make sense. These old, like, and I'm going to say older guys, my generation saying, oh, I used to work 18. Like, that's nice. You worked 18. I've done 18-hour shifts. They suck.
Yeah, they're awful. No one wants to do that.
And at my age right now, I'm burnt out as fuck when I think about those 18-hour shifts. But you can't expect the next generation to do it. Well, why can't we? Well, it's the next generation. So between technology, this generational push, I'm loving the Engage. I'm going to do way more research on Engage for sure. How is everything sort of evolving for you over the next couple of years when it comes to these trainings and these sort of working with culture and everything in the hospitality sector?
Yeah, so I think for us, we see AI coming into the space as a force multiplier for training and cultural change, because studies show, especially in the younger millennials and the Gen Z, that they are more open to take advice from a machine than they are from their boss. Okay, so let's embrace that. Let's go, lean in on that and say, okay, if we can develop tools that will give them the positive feedback and developmental feedback on a cadence that resonates with them and when they want it and where they want it, which is on their phone, in a way that doesn't feel judgy, they're much more likely to take it on board, especially if you can then tie it to their income. If you can say,
Mhm.
you know, most servers that try this dialogue when it comes to dessert increase their tip average by 4%. Or, these are the kind of stats that the AI is finding. It's unbelievable what you feed it data and it comes back with unbelievable insights. And also for our people, we have client success consultants that support these, thousands of clients all remotely. And we're trying to figure out how do we deploy the AI to be able to take their most mundane tasks and automate them so that they can do the more interesting work for more people, which makes their job more fulfilling. So for servers and front desk agents, we think that the AI can almost change the way training is handled because you can give them the training. We still do some training. We still believe in ramping people up. We call them power-ups. Fill up the battery, get people excited, what's in it for me, and send them off into the world to conquer. But then that constant reinforcement can be done very effectively using technology. And it's, I think, what the younger generation wants. And I'll give you something that we're not doing this yet, but imagine this. Imagine the AI thinks of something and it wants to tell the server. So it writes a script and then it sends that script to a generative AI model that generates a video with their name in it and sends it to them. That's like insane. That's probably 2 years away from being a viable reality in real time. But it's like, that's crazy to think about. That's where we could be. They could have their own little Netflix thing where the AI pops up and talks to them personally about their own performance.
And we just had a silly paperclip on Word.
Yeah, we had a clipboard.
Well, that's the thing is, like, I had a friend who runs a couple of restaurants. Well, he owns a couple of restaurants now, but he put AI telephone answering. And when you're talking about a restaurant, busy Friday night, it can answer all the questions. In a hotel, the worst thing I always see is when it's a busy front desk and you're just about to check in and you either have the frontline person answering the phone or saying, can you please hold? Both of those things are either bad for the person on the phone or the person that is in line waiting to check in.
Yeah.
Busy Friday afternoon when you just want to check in and have a shower and go out, it is a pain in my ass. But AI answering phones and stuff is absolutely insane.
Right. It's that kind of stuff. I have a funny anecdote. I used to work with this guy when I was a front desk agent, and he would wait for it comes in waves. The plane lands half an hour away, the lobby fills up. As soon as the lobby filled up, he'd get on the phone and he wouldn't even be talking to anybody. And I couldn't do anything about it because I'm engaged now. There's like 5 agents checking in and he's on the phone until the crowd leaves, then he would hang the phone up. When I got promoted, I eventually fired him. But yeah, those are the kind of things that, have the AI answer the phone, no brainer. That makes all the sense in the world. Have it send follow-ups, text message follow-ups, reminders, all the stuff that let the humans interact with the humans and be more productive and be able to generate more revenue. That's what we believe. Make AI a force multiplier, not a replacement.
And I think that's a big thing, that if you're using it to replace it, that's up to you. And I think it's not the best way to use it. But man, just one last question before we tie this up. A lot of hotels are unionized, and this just popped in my head because dealing with unions are tough at the best of times. As you said, the sacred cow mentality with long tenured staff. How do you struggle with that, or is it something you can sort of play into with your working with management to sort of come down to the very bottom tier staff member?
Yeah, I think we have had a lot of success in unionized environments. I mean, I would say probably half the hotels we're in are either in a unionized environment or are in a country that basically functions as if it's a labor union. And it's because we are frontline performance group. So everything we do is frontline centric. It's all about improving the lives and performance of the front line, and they get that immediately. And because we are really good at incentives and rewards and helping our clients put the right ones in place, we can bridge the gap between the front line and the manager, because when all of a sudden a new incentive is being deployed, they're able to make more money, we're helping them. It can bridge the gap. Famously, we went into the first hotel front desk we ever went to. When we got there, and we were sent there to die. The company, we were annoying. We were like pestering them because we were a little company at the time. And they were like, okay, go, just send them over there and they'll quit and they'll go away. But when we got there, there were like 37 union grievances filed against the front of the house management team. The shop steward was like talking to stone, very cold. But it ended up being it was a great entree to the market for us. It turned into a huge success. It actually helped the union management relationship over time. So because we're there to help them and they know that, we tend to be able to help the management team. So from that standpoint, we haven't really had an issue in union environments.
So at the end of every podcast, I always ask 5 deep podcast questions. So what is one lesson or experience that has shaped your perspective the most, and how do you carry that forward in your life?
Wow. This is a pretty broad one, but at one point in my career, my manager pulled me aside and said, "You are an insufferable know-it-all, and people don't like working with you." And I was. This is when I was young, and I call it being undressed. He undressed me, but then he coached me, and it changed my whole leadership perspective, my whole perspective on working with teams and peers. And just because you know the right answer doesn't mean you can't let other people get there. And often as a leader, that's the most important thing, is you're there to stop them from making a fatal mistake, but you got to let them get there. So that changed my perspective on my entire career. And my career kind of took off after that realization. So the other perspective is people want you to be direct with them, and they want you to tell them where their blind spots are as a leader. That's how they grow, even though in that 5 minutes, it's pretty awkward.
If you could leave one lasting message or piece of wisdom for the world, what would it be and why?
There's nothing more important than human relationships. Everything else is nonsense. And if you want to have a fulfilling life, keep that perspective in your work, in your home life, and don't sweat all the other nonsense. Because if you're good to people, they'll be good back.
Looking back on your journey, what is something you wish you had understood earlier in life?
There are 2 realities to your career. One is the quality of the work that you do. The other is how your work is perceived. And when you can get those things in balance, you're going to be hugely successful. And I struggled with the second one. I worked hard, I did good work, but I was perceived as a know-it-all. I was perceived maybe as a little difficult. So when I sorted that out and I brought those 2 things in alignment, my career took off. So perception is reality, reality is reality. They're both reality.
How do you define success, and has your definition of it changed over time?
From a corporate success standpoint, I think growth is what drives me, is to grow the business, to grow the opportunities for people to join the business. I've always loved creating jobs and having those jobs contribute to the mission. And so I think that probably is still I would still have that same answer.
What are you hoping your legacy will be, and what steps are you taking to build it?
Well, I would love my legacy to be that I've helped a lot of people be successful, and they remember that I helped them. And probably more importantly, that I've set my sons up to be self-sufficient in the world, and that they're able to contribute and help other people as well.
That's amazing. Geoffrey, thank you so much for your time, man. It's interesting now, just from a personal standpoint for the podcast, I'm getting a lot of people hitting me up and not necessarily just in my sphere of things. And it's a little bit out of my comfort zone to be interviewing people who I may not have a close relationship with. And I think you're actually close to one of the very first people that are even outside my usual scope. So I really appreciate you coming on the show, and it was eye-opening. It's I like to because it reinforces the things that I say. But when I say it, people look at me. You said that perception and reality. Like when I say it, people go, "Oh, he's just a ranting old dude in the hospitality industry." But then, like, it reinforces the fact that I am actually saying shit that actually matters.
Yes, you're actually wise and knowledgeable, and I'm honored to be one of the first outside of your sphere, and I feel like I know you already. So you're very good at what you do.
I appreciate that very much. Well, thank you so much. I'll let you enjoy the rest of your day, and